I'm Norman Robinson, and welcome to Affordable Housing Matters. On today's show, we will discuss tenant-based housing vouchers that could change the lives of over 12,000 households. Also, we will discuss a few of the major housing changes that have happened in the year 2022. We have a great show planned for you, so don't go far. You know, the Housing Authority of New Orleans has seen great leadership in recent years, especially with the current Executive Director and Chief Administrator of HANO, Yvette Hester. While in position, Hester has redeveloped over 400 affordable housing units, managed the agency's portfolio of 4,000 low-income units, and helped to restore 250 housing units across 2 communities. She has also helped mediate the crisis of finding affordable housing here in our city. And joining me now to discuss this crisis and the efforts being made toward its conclusion and resolution is Executive Director of HANO, Ms. Yvette Hester. Welcome to Affordable Housing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're quite welcome. You know, this is a show where people are always asking the moderator questions about housing, and I really don't know, and I tell them I don't know, but I know people who do know, and you happen to be one of those people here today. And when we leave this program, we like people to understand that they have some information that they can use. So let's start by telling them a brief history of HANO.
So HANO was started in under the 1937 Housing Act. It was chartered through the state of Louisiana and has been operating for over 80 years. And it is a needed agency to help low to moderate income families have that foundation, a stable foundation, which is a home to live in, not just a unit, but a home. And so HANO serves over 22,000 families in the city of New Orleans between 2 different programs. One is our Housing Choice Voucher Program, which serves over 18,000 families. And what that is a rental assistance program. And some of you all know it as Section 8.
Yes, I've heard of that.
And then we have 4,000 units that we serve in our affordable housing program, which is tied, the subsidy is tied to the unit. So you'll see properties like Burrell Commons and Fisher, and those are the properties where we have our affordable units.
So what is the difference in terms of me being a viewer listening to you explain what HANO is in trying to apply for assistance under HANO in some of these programs? So
all of our programs are wait list driven. Okay. And that is prescribed by the federal government. In order to administer these programs, we must have wait lists for all of our different programs that we offer. So if a person is interested in applying, they can go to our website and look and see what wait lists are open. For instance, our Housing Choice Voucher wait list was recently opened, and we gave families about a week to apply, and then we closed that waiting list because we had a sufficient number of families on that wait list that we can serve in the next 2 years. And so we have, I think, 12,000 families now on that wait list, and that's a demonstration of what the need is in the community.
Oh, the need is definitely great. You can see it on the streets. I'm a member of the Unity of Greater New Orleans Advisory Board, and we try to assist the homeless, and you can see that they're spread out all over the city, especially down near the convention center. How is HANO in terms of reaching out to those people?
So we have partnerships with Unity. Unity is designated as the agency that provides the continuum of care. And so we work very closely with them by reserving vouchers to assist that population because they're more equipped to provide the case management that's needed for that population. And so we have reservations of vouchers to assist families in various stages of their need.
So What about funding? We hear so much about the concerns over inflation and financial distress. So is HANO in a position where they are sustainable in terms of funding?
Yeah. HANO is very in a good financial position. Most of our funding, and I want to say about 99% of our funding, comes from the federal government. And the federal government in the last couple of years has been very, very generous in providing resources for affordable housing. Where we are struggling, we have a development arm in our agency. And that development arm is responsible for expanding affordable housing and preserving affordable housing. And we expand affordable housing by forming partnerships with the private sector. And so we have a lot of projects in the queue right now that's in a holding pattern because of inflation, because of rising interest rates, because of the strain on the labor market. And so that's causing some delays and quite frankly some gaps that need to be filled for those projects to go forward.
There's a lot being said now about I guess the challenges that the city of New Orleans is going through, not so much about finances now, but finances in the past. What is the distinction or the relationship between HANO and the city of New Orleans?
So the HANO is not a city agency. We are not a part of the executive management of the city. However, our board members are appointed by the mayor, and so there is some connective tissue between the two of us. Now, we work in partnership with the city because a lot of our properties and projects, the city is helping us using their financial vehicles to support our projects. For instance, we have a number of projects in the queue where the city's pledging some CDBG dollars to, like the Maison Royal project in the Marigny. The city is also supporting Christopher Park, which is on the West Bank, using CDBG dollars.
Could you explain to our viewers what CDBG means?
Community Development Block Grant Funds, and those are dispersed by the federal government to the city. And they have a formula. It's secret. It's a secret formula. It's a secret formula that they use to determine how much money each city will receive.
Okay, and how dependent are you on those particular grants?
Our development department is, I wouldn't say dependent, but I would say the resources help move projects forward faster. To get an assembly of resources to move a project forward, it takes a long time. And the private sector relies on, state funding, federal funding, and then of course they have to borrow money. And all of those things take time to assemble. So any additional resources that the city or the state can pledge helps the project go forward faster.
How much of that, I'll use that word depend. I don't think you like that word. I'm going to use that word depend again, but how much of that is dependent upon grant writing?
And so some of it is dependent upon applications, not necessarily grant writing. So we submit applications to like the developers, and the private sector will submit a low-income housing tax credit application to the state. And it's not necessarily a grant writing function, it's just filling out the application and describing your project and providing financial information about the project.
Okay, so they send out information to you knowing what's available, what can be accessed, and you just fill out the application.
Well, they fill out the application and submit it to the state for low-income housing tax credits, or they can submit it to the federal government for home funds.
Ideally, if you had everything that you need, everything that you need right in front of you, how many people could you accommodate?
Well, we have about over 900 units right now in the queue. And so I would say 900 units could serve possibly 900 families, and let's say roughly 2.5 people in, or let's say three people in each, about 18,000 people.
That sounds pretty optimistic.
1,800, I'm sorry.
1,800 people?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds, so that's in the queue though.
Yeah, that's in the queue right now. That's in the queue right now.
Those are people waiting?
No, these are development projects that are in the queue that we're waiting to get all of the resources needed so that we can build new affordable housing.
I got you. And so how long do you think that's going to take?
2 to 3 years.
2 to 3?
Yes.
Okay. And given the governmental process of handling things, is that an optimistic projection?
That's a conservative projection. That's a very conservative projection right now.
It's been said that being housed or finding a home takes more than just being placed in a home, that there's an educational component that's necessary for people to go through. How do you handle that?
We have orientation for our families participating in our Housing Choice Voucher Program, and so in that program, they rent housing when they're in the private sector, in the private market, and so they have an orientation as a part of that program that they go through. And in that orientation, they learn about, community responsibility. They learn about what's in their lease, provisions that they should look for. We tell them about areas where there's less poverty or deconcentration. And we tell them about landlord responsibilities and their responsibilities in the program.
I'm interested in this information about areas of less poverty. And why is that important?
That's important because those areas typically have better schools, access to transportation, better services around them, supermarkets, health services, etc.
And in terms of telling them what to expect from their landlord, what's being said?
Well, what's being said is pay particular attention to what your responsibilities are and what the landlord's responsibilities are with respect to repairs. Because in some lease agreements, you may have provisions in there that say, I will pay for anything up to $75 worth of repairs, and anything else is your responsibility. So they need to pay attention to those types of provisions.
So it's not as simple as coming to HANO to say, listen, my landlord won't fix my drain in my bathroom, so go out and do something about it.
Well,
that's not what HANO does?
No, well, if a tenant in the Housing Choice Voucher Program or even in one of our affordable programs, if they have an issue with their landlord, and especially a maintenance issue, we will conduct a special inspection. So we'll send an inspector out to take a look at it, and if the landlord is responsible for repairing that, the inspector will send him a report and say, hey, this is broken, you have a certain number of days to repair that item.
How successful are you in talking landlords into renting their property to people under this program?
Well, it's been very successful of late, and especially during COVID when there was eviction moratorium, right? And so we are guaranteed, we guaranteed the payments.
Well, that's true. Yes.
So they didn't miss a beat. So we didn't have any issues with having, an ample supply of landlords participating in the program. The challenge for us is there's not an ample supply of units in the area.
Yeah.
So that is the biggest challenge. Our families are finding it very, very difficult to find units in some cases, and we have to extend the time that they have for their vouchers. So we've done that, and we've been very generous with our participants in that regard because we know that the marketplace is very tough right now.
All right, Ms. Yvette Hester, Executive Director of HANO, you've given us some very valuable information. Hopefully our viewers can use that. And it's been a delight having you. Please come back and visit again.
I will. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh.
We'll have more affordable housing matters right after this break, so don't go far. Welcome back. If you ever wondered who's the driving force behind the Home Builders Association of Greater New Orleans, it's none other than Dan Mills. His latest projects give us a more intricate view on what's going on in the city concerning the local housing market, and boy is that interesting, post-Ida repairs, construction costs, and construction labor needs. And welcome again to the show that a lot of viewers are interested in learning about housing affordability and housing occupancy in the Greater New Orleans area. Dan, it's nice to have you at Affordable Housing Matters again.
Thanks so much, Norm. I'm happy to be here.
We are in the throes of a great challenge now in terms of home ownership. Tell us about what's going on with that.
You know, we face a lot of headwinds in home building, and home ownership is clearly affected by that. You know, at the national level, we have real issues with mortgage rates, but more issue here locally is dealing with the insurance rates. We have a lot of things going for us in terms of low-cost provider in this area. We have lower energy rates, for example. However, the insurance rates, due to our location and proximity and our frequency of disasters that have hit us, have caused insurance carriers to move out of our area, and it's caused insurance rates to go up pretty significantly. And our new risk rating 2.0 that FEMA has put out for flood, our insurance commissioner, Jim Donelon, has called it ruinous for our area. And then we have had, after Ida, we've had numerous companies that have left our marketplace, putting greater strain on the Louisiana Citizens Insurance Program, who now has over 130,000 policies. And so the reinsurance that they're having to buy to cover our citizens in this community is going through the roof, and we've seen a 63% increase approved for January 1st, and that's going to be hugely impactful. And again, that word from Jim Donelon, ruinous, is really worrisome.
Give me an example, if you will, Dan, of a person, of the kind of obstacles a person might face trying to jump into the affordable housing market right now.
It's a real challenge. Flood is a #1 thing. I'm in an X zone just on my personal home, and I used to get $600 insurance rate for the flood insurance program through FEMA, and that national flood insurance program, the rates are going up. I'm looking at a new rate of $3,400, so I will increase by 18% every year over the next 7 or 8 years until I reach that new rate. So that's going from $50 a month to $300 a month on my personal property. So this is going to impact people broadly, and that's in an X zone in a home that hasn't flooded since it was built in 1970. So the flood insurance rate, pushing up that monthly cost, is hugely impactful. You know, I've been very fortunate in life and in business, but many are on fixed incomes, and this is a situation that can be detrimental to their ability to stay in their homes just from flood insurance.
So if it can be detrimental for people to stay in their homes, it can be even more disastrous for people trying to get into a home.
That's right.
Say I'm looking for a $200,000 house in the Ninth Ward.
Absolutely. If you can find a $200,000 home, the flood insurance rate is going to be, again, around $3,400, $3,500, $3,600, so around $300 a month for that. Then we have to factor in the property insurance and the wind and hail. So when we begin looking at the wind and hail, there are no new carriers that are writing business here for any properties with a roof that's less than 5 years old, I understand from our insurance members. So if you have an older property, it's only the Citizens Plan that you're eligible to get into, and those rates are going up dramatically because so many carriers have left. So our Citizens Plan has over 130,000 policies. They're having to buy reinsurance on the national market. Due to storms and other catastrophes nationwide, the reinsurance market is upside down right now. So the insurance carriers have lost dramatic amounts of money. And so we're seeing those Wind and hail rates go up 63% January 1 for residential, and they already went up 70% on commercial properties. And then that's only wind and hail. The property insurance as well, the homeowner's policy, those rates have gone up dramatically, and in particular commercial properties have gone up over 100% in 12 months for some of our members. So those costs can be dramatic. On an apartment complex, that might mean a policy goes up from $50,000 a year to $100,000 or $110,000 a year, and those multifamily unit owners have got to figure out how to account for that additional $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in insurance, and that leads to higher rental rates.
Wow. Now, the Home Builders Association is installing a new board. How might they handle this challenge?
We were fortunate to install a new set of senior officers and a new board on November 29th. And so our leadership is coming in, and we've been looking at a number of options. So the number one driving force for affordable housing here is insurance right now. Now, there are other factors in terms of regulation and in terms of building supply and in terms of workforce shortages. These are all issues that many industries are dealing with. The insurance one is impactful for our housing affordability. And so we've got to find ways to attract insurance carriers back into our market. They have to feel safe in writing policies in our area. So what that means is we've got to give them pathways that show the resiliency of our housing. So that means we need to build stronger, more resilient homes. And the state of Louisiana has passed the new residential coding for building construction based on the 2021 standards from the International Code Council. That's going to require us, beginning January 1st, to implement new codes that will provide the most resilient housing that we have ever built in this state. So for an example, a roof, instead of just being plywood decking with clips, the roof will now be seamed. There will be tape at the seams, so that if a shingle comes off of the roof, there's still waterproofing underneath that shingle, because the real cost of repair is not replacing that shingle. It's when you get water penetration in the house and your insulation and your ceiling comes down, and now you've got, you know, a real situation. So the new IRC 2021 covers the specifications to build more resiliently, to prevent those kinds of impacts, and the insurance companies know this. And as we see those codes be implemented in our area, we believe that's going to attract more carriers back in and thus bring the cost of insurance down a bit.
Now, I have to ask you this question because it's always a factor in Louisiana and especially in New Orleans. To what degree does politics enter into this?
You know, politics is a way of life. Whether we're in New Orleans or we're in Chicago or we're in New York City, it's going to be a factor. And so bringing everyone together on the same page is always a challenge. But we've taken that first step, and I, for one, am really excited. You know, these new codes, they're going to cost a little bit more. We have to pay in order to build and add that. It's not going to be less expensive to add taping and waterproofing to these roofs, for example. But the long term is greater resiliency and lower rates on our insurance. And so that is really the key outcome. And we live in an area of the country that unfortunately is susceptible to those kinds of impacts, so we need to build for it. The flood insurance is another matter, though, because flood, FEMA is in control of those rates, and they're looking at it in a national perspective, and we face different flood risks here. But you know who else faces national insurance crises is the western states with the fire insurance. We see earthquake insurance being a common exclusion on the West Coast. We see flood being a primary one here. We see wind and hail in the central part of the country. And so maybe there's an opportunity. Certainly we haven't embraced or found anything that's 100%, but maybe there's an opportunity for, instead of a national flood program, a national catastrophe program that can cover many different risks at the national level. And that's definitely political. But if you can get broad-based buy-in, there's only 15% of the country participates in the flood program. So that means those participating are bearing a very high cost for it. And who buys flood insurance? Those that are most at risk. If you can spread the risk across the entire country,
yeah.
then the number of catastrophes that we have are a smaller percentage of the total pool. We may be able to find some relief.
Well,
so
that makes too much sense.
People smarter than me are looking at this.
That makes too much sense, Dan, so I don't know if the politicians can handle that.
That's right.
To what extent is the insurance commissioner responsible for the rise in property?
One of the things that the insurance commissioner can do and is doing is trying to find incentives to bring insurance carriers back in. And so post-Katrina, they were able to offer some incentive programs to reduce the risk impact or provide financial incentives to attract carriers to come back in the shorter term. You know, the changing the codes and building more resiliency is a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to help with the long-term solution, but they're not going to come back immediately because it takes time to change the resiliency of our housing stock. So Commissioner Donlan's office is working hard on that aspect as in a two-prong approach to try to find that, and that requires, again, that political element and finding the funding in order to put in there and attract those carriers back.
You know, the Home Building Association, the home building in general, has been a male-dominated industry. And now that women are getting involved, I guess the women are saying, why is this happening now that we're coming on stage?
You know, we face the same challenge that nursing has faced for years and years, you know, because it's very hard to get the men into the nursing field. And in housing, it's the same thing. When we're in building, it's very difficult to attract women into that environment. And there's a lack of awareness that there's opportunity for women to be involved in construction. And we have a council with our HBA, that's the Professional Women in Building. It's a very successful council. We have almost 50 members now in that council. They were nominated for a national award. They raised scholarship funds and helped out. They awarded a scholarship to Jamie Ribeiro de Sena, just announced last week. She got a scholarship. She was working in hospitality, and she said, you know, I really like working with my hands. I want to make a change. So she got involved with our Build Strong Academy on Williams Boulevard. She was able to enroll. She has gotten a certification in carpentry. She got an OSHA certification for safety. And she's very excited, and the Professional Women in Building Council awarded her a scholarship to help her with her costs of living and enrollment. And now she's looking at probably doing construction management with LSU Online as she begins to work in the industry. So she's making that transition. It's really exciting to see people taking advantage of that Build Strong Academy, and even more ingratiating to see women getting involved in the construction industry.
Is this something that can also be projected to high schools and young females, you know, who are students coming up from middle school on into high school? I see you've got a book there that says The House That She Built.
We do, you know. So one of our members, Molly Elkman, is an author, and she did this book called The House That She Built. And it's an amazing book. The ladies that produced this got together and built a home, and it was all women contractors on that build. And then they documented this down in a picture book. This is targeted for 1st to 3rd grade to help them understand, young women, young girls, to understand what's behind those walls, what's in that house, how does this all come together, and how could I be a part of that? And by seeing that, not only do the girls understand they can get involved and that this is maybe a path for their career, but it also helps the parents understand that there is a place for women in the workforce.
Yeah, that my wife would be very happy to see that book, because she gets very nervous when she sees me with tools. I remember my co-anchor Chris Fairbairn once saw me with a circular saw. She almost had apoplexy. Hold on to that saw, Norman.
You know, these books are available on Amazon.com.
Okay.
But I've got one for you, and you can bring over to your wife, and she'll be more than happy to provide that for you.
I can prove to her that I have been where I said I was going.
That's right.
Thank you, Dan. It's always a pleasure to have you visit with us here on Affordable Housing, and we look forward to your revisit again.
My pleasure, Norm. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And we would like to thank our guests for joining us here on Affordable Housing Matters. Also, if you miss an episode of our program, just click on the old QR code on our screen, and that will lead you to our YouTube page, where you can view all of our past programs at your leisure. Thanks again for watching. I'm Norman Robinson, and we will see you next time on Affordable Housing Matters.